Okay, what I'm going to do today is go through some of my slightly older JavaScript and WebAssembly. There you go, WebAssembly. To review it, look at this message. I guess I probably could have put an actual emoji smiley in there, but I didn't. So yeah, I'm going to review it because it's worth going back to these things and having a look at what you've written before, because often it's garbage, and even if it isn't, technology might have moved on. And hopefully, you'll be aware of that. But the other thing, as might be quite apparent, is that I have some uncommitted changes. so I'm going to need to find out what those were. This is always the problem with doing your own projects. It's very easy to make a bunch of changes and you don't quite get to committing them because whatever you weren't finished with doing the work, and so they just sit there. They just sit there uncommitted for a million years. So let's have a look at what my head commit was. Yeah, look at that, October 2019. That's insane. That's like 6 months ago. Well, that's a long time. All right, so here I've got the terminal up. I don't have to have it down here. I just find it convenient because there are certain things that I know exactly how to do on the command line. So I will do them on the command line, and that gets me there. So I do have there are options on the menus that I can use for a lot of the Git stuff. But if it's a very expressive command, then it's something I would normally do on the command line. So git diff dash dash git diff dash dash cached. Look at this, I misspelled it. That's something that I wouldn't expect to find there. In fact, we can have a look. Yeah, so it doesn't have it in here strictly, although in fact you can view the diffs anyway. But yeah, I want to have a look at what these are. So I think I must have had in my head at the time that I need to optimize this. So I've dropped a for each here and I've expanded it in situ. I believe that's correct. I will double check that in a second. Just in terms of just running the tests that I have. And what we got here, so I added a wrapping method. Yeah, that's all I did there. And it looks like I removed some, so this is some debugging stuff. Yeah, so biggest root count is still debugging, even though it might not look like it. And yeah, so this is test, which appears to have been replaced with a method to do the same thing, which is, yeah, there you go, this. And yeah, so a little bit more than that. All right, so I've got Safari open already. I'm gonna go into that, and here is the page. Reload it. Looks like it works fine. The intended test is to make this much larger. Random test. There you go. Nice little thing. It's so the program is to find a path between these 2 points. It actually has tested all of the parts that look black here, going out in as short a path as it can do. And the colored points are the active edges. So as soon as it finds a point where both active edges meet, that's the shortest path, or it's one of the shortest paths. So perfectly acceptable. So I've got an all test button, which does some established tests that I've done before where I'm pretty sure I know what's going on. There you go, these are much larger. And look at these gorgeous arrows. So these arrows are actually showing which way the this is showing what the way back to the start point is for each of these. So for the first step from this blue thing, it will have done these two vertical arrows and this horizontal arrow. It will have tried going into those positions and succeeded. And the step after that, it will have done the diagonal arrow here, and it will have kept doing that repeatedly. Meanwhile, on this side, you've got the same with the green, and that's going out repeatedly itself. So the joining point in this case is these two, I believe. So this is at this point, this or at this point possibly, one side or the other will have detected that it's just run into a route for the other side, and then as soon as that happens, everything's over. And this route, which is the bottom one here, this route has a cost which is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 6, which is 12 plus 6, which is 18. So that's the correct value. So this is all working correctly at the moment. So firstly, I'm going to deal with these because this is actually a very simple change, and that's in core.js. That's this one. So I just add it and give it a nice commit message. So expand steps inline. It doesn't need to be a lot more descriptive than that. It just needs to be enough that you can look back and know what was intended when doing the commit, rather than perhaps what was done, because you can work out what was done, but the thing that you often don't know is what was intended. Right. So this has the red wigglies, the dreaded red wigglies, and that means that something is bad. This condition will always return true, since the function is always defined. Did you mean to call it instead? Yes. Thank you. Yes, I did mean to call it. That's an interesting one, actually, because that means that I haven't tested this scenario, but the reason I haven't tested this scenario is because this one is the no route found scenario. So returning null is fine. It's fine for it to have done that without unilaterally in this case, just because it happens that the only situation where it doesn't do that is where the route isn't found, and that's not the one that I'm testing. But it is something to fix, so I have fixed it. Right. What else have we got going on here? This is a nightmare of red. So I'm absolutely going to have to deal with that nightmare of red. But I'm going to see if I can commit some of this stuff first. So here I am in the diff view. So it's showing me the old copy on the left and the new copy on the right. And I can see quite easily what's changed, although I might need to scroll backwards and forwards a bit. So I want to see if add new route does exactly this, or at least does this and maybe something else. So where are you, add new route? It's new routes blah.push blah. Okay, and that does look like the same thing. So this might actually be increasing cost. This might be making everything slower. I don't know. If it is, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Right, so I want to add this part, stage selected ranges. And this is where I'm going to need to be slightly careful, because you need to make sure you're not accidentally committing more than you really intend to commit. Right, I want this range, I believe. Ooh, this range. Right, let's try this. Stage selected ranges. Oh, that didn't quite do what I wanted, but that actually came very close. Yeah, so I still do want. Oh no, it actually did do exactly what I wanted. So there are two closed curlies here. There are two closed curlies here. What it's done here is it's recognized change in indentation, and it's just said, "Oh, you don't need to commit that. You don't mean to do that as a commit." But I kind of do, and in fact, this is where my life is a little bit too complicated. I'm going to need to do this manually. So git add. Oh, actually, no, maybe I won't. Maybe I won't. Oh, whatever. I'm gonna do it manually. This is a thing I know how to do. So there you go. So that was the first hunk. That was the one that definitely was needed. And yes, this is the part that I want to manually deal with. So, so this one, we don't want this change. So I'm going to replace the minus with a space and delete the plus. We don't want this change either. We have no reason to keep this. Right, and then this is the part that we do want. Somewhat interestingly, I mean, well, it depends what you consider to be interesting, really, but although these, so the diff engine that's in use is one that's expected to be used with programming languages which extensively use close curly bracket to end. It still doesn't quite get that that's the thing that's changed. That, or rather, it doesn't quite get that the new lines that you've added end with a curly. It assumes that they start with a curly for its own special reasons. Ultimately, that will be down to something like optimization in terms of starting at the earliest point where you can detect that something may have changed. Okay, so that's the bit that I want to add. So now X to exit with right, and I'm going to commit that. So my commit message to that can be refactor change adding new root to a method. I think I remember why I did that, because I was doing a bunch of similar changes at the time, which were actually all in aid of using that WebAssembly code, this stuff here, because it needs to have a specific code entry point to do its stuff. So in order to actually make use of the WebAssembly, you really want to have the edge at which the code will be entered also be a method. Right, so so I've reduced that a little bit. Let's see what the other changes are here. So I hit the wrong button there. So this is the view file button. If I just click on the file, it'll show me the differences. So yes, so the biggest root count thing that was not used apparently. So I can add this range. So stage selected range, that's great. And is there another range which uses biggest root count? No, apparently not. Okay, so drop biggest root count, because we don't use it anymore. Okay, so what we got next? So this is has roots. I'll explain what this does actually, because there's not a reason why I can't explain that, and I'll explain it while looking at the current version of the file, because here I'll get nice mouse over behavior. I don't like my own inconsistent indentation here. I'm actually going to fix that. Right, there we go. It's a little bit more clear now. So object.values takes a key to value map. This actually is not helpful, thank you. It takes a key value map, which is to say a standard JavaScript object, and instead of returning the object itself, it returns an array, which is all of the values corresponding to the keys in their original order. So here it's a bunch of things which have from properties and to properties. In fact, it's a bunch of arrays of things which are like that. So here we have an array of things. This probably doesn't recognize yet. Look how nice that is. So that's explaining to me exactly what my input data is there. So my input data is an array. It's an array of it's an array of arrays of these from and to objects. So sum on this returns true if any of the if any of the array members would return true for the function, and then all this function does is return the length, and 0 is false. Anything other than 0 is true. So all this is doing is saying if new roots contains anything with at least one item, or if roots contains anything with at least one item, then it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. I haven't got documentation on this. Normally, if it's something where the name is completely self-descriptive, I wouldn't worry about whether it's documented or not. But there are plenty of cases where I do document it. You can see down here, at least I've got a documented argument. So has roots we can definitely deal with, but I do need to be in the diff view to do this. So there you go. So we want to stage this range, and then down here stage this range. Right, so refactor put roots test into a method. Right, okay, so new roots for, I don't know quite where that's used. Oh, it's here. Oh, there you go. That's an easy answer for myself there. So this is returning the same thing as new roots cost. It's just doing it in a slightly more optimizable form. And in particular, I would bet that my intent here was to offload this particular endpoint into the WebAssembly. So this I am going to stage, and this I will stage. And this is just another refactor. Okay, and now I've actually got a relatively small set of changes, and it looks like I've actually got, yes. And so this is a very strange change, because I've changed from step roots to step roots inner, but I don't see I don't see that I already had a reference to step roots inner, so I don't know how that could possibly be working. And it also dropped some arguments. That's not a thing I wanted to see. So this is telling me I've got a change here, even though I haven't seen it before. This is probably another of those situations where it saw that the spacing had changed and it decided I don't need that. So, right, I'm adding that to the index. So that's now here as much as it won't. There you go. Show weight space differences. Thank you. Right. So that's now here in the index, and what I can do, although it's you absolutely want to be careful here because it's very easy to end up making the wrong commit. So I'm checking if the top commit is the one that was doing link roots. As it happens, it is. So that's good, because what I'm going to do is do commit staged amend, which modifies what my last commit was into a form that includes what the current index is. So that's a much better output than I had before. And look at me. Look at me. I think I must have got... Did I get it wrong? No, I didn't get it wrong. Oh, there have been times, many times before, many times, where I've done a commit and I've unintentionally had something in the index that I didn't think I had there at the time. When you do that, life becomes a bit messy. Life becomes difficult because you've got a commit that no longer makes any sense there. And there are ways to recover from that, but I'm not going to deal with that today. That's a matter for another time. So for now, I'm going to try to find out what happened with this. So I'm just going to search for step roots inner. So it does exist already somehow. Step roots does exist as well. Right, so I think this had already changed. Okay, that's a bit of a mess. That means there's an earlier commit that doesn't make any sense either, and it was not one of the ones I just did. So I'm a little bit annoyed at that. And also, actually, step roots inner is in the wrong place as far as I'm concerned. This is something that I would always put after step roots, because then it's in lexical order. So and actually, this does make a little bit more sense in terms of just chaining from one to the other anyway. All right, so I'm going to add this. I'm going to save it first because it won't make any sense otherwise. I'm actually just going to check the differences, make sure it's just there. That is the only place I would be able to see it on this line. So it's very clear. So we'll just hit the plus and break out step roots inner. So apparently I hadn't done that before. Now I've done it. So that is technically a fixed commit, but I don't really know that at the time. Okay, so it looks like I'm not going to really get around to the WebAssembly in this particular video because I've only got like 6 minutes left of the amount of time that I've allocated myself. But I will go through and have a look at all of these horrible red lines. So these streaks of red that are here, these red lines here, this number 58 here. This message is just the message that you always get. Once you turn null checking on, everything apparently becomes null. The world ends. A mess falls upon you. It is terrible. It's particularly an annoyance to get this because a lot of the time you know that in practice it will not be null. It will be non-null. Well, it's okay. I can explain what null is. I'm probably not going to do that right this second again, because I want to get some code done. I want to get this eliminated. So, in terms of dealing with not null issues, usually a good starting point is to stop using functions inside functions, because it no longer knows. The compiling environment no longer knows that the code inside is run at the time that the function is called. Even though conventionally that would certainly be the case, in principle it doesn't have to. Somebody could override what for each does, and they could make it do some other stuff. We could certainly have a long and interesting conversation about whether that's really a thing that makes sense, whether that's the thing that matters, but usually it doesn't matter, because usually you can just convert it into a for of loop instead. And that's actually not something that I'm going to do here. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to guard these values. So when I say guard, I mean I'm going to say, if they're not set, you make an error. Let's say this dot left is unset. Null, actually. Right, so by doing that, the compiler knows that past that point, it can't be null, because it would have already left the function. So I'm going to do this for both of the other values that it's complaining about. So right and right, and then this becomes m node. There we go. Right, so that gets rid of some of my horrible red lines. That shouldn't affect the running of it, but I will happily check it. So I'm just going to reload the page. That looks fine, and I'm going to do all tests. They all pass, so I'm satisfied with that. Having done that, I'm going to immediately add to the index, because I firmly intend that that's how that's going to work. Okay, so this is an interesting case, because I don't actually know what the semantics of this are. So previously I said that if left is unset, then it's infinity. I don't know if it's possible for right to be unset. I think what I'm going to do for this purpose is I am just going to do the same kind of test, same kind of throw, and hopefully that won't throw unexpectedly. All right, so down here, I laugh because it's exactly the same scenario, yeah, I'm literally just gonna copy and paste those two lines. I could certainly do with having more strict checks on these things, having a more expressive way of saying that left and right are not null. So there we go. So that's still fine. Oh, what a thing! What a thing to have a problem with. I'll get back to that one. What I'm looking for right now is cases where a value is null. There you go. So this is another one which is null. So I'm just going to copy this one. So it's perfectly fine. So it's fine in terms of the functionality here to throw an exception, because in fact an exception, yes, an exception will be thrown anyway. Canvas context. Yes, an exception will be thrown anyway. This is just changing it from an exception, which is a runtime crash into an exception, which is one that that I can understand a little bit more easily. So grid map. Why would grid map not be set here? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to say there's no particular answer to that, but I can absolutely just test for it again. And this is only for displaying the results anyway. So what I know that at this point, it wouldn't make any sense for grid map to be null. Why would that ever happen? But the compiler correctly is saying to me, well, it could be null. So I am dealing with this. So current test, again, current test would always be non-null. I happen to know that that is the case. So I will just test for it. Current test. There you go. It stopped complaining about that. And yes, this selector query could be null technically. As it happens, I'm pretty confident that it isn't. So a thing that the VS Code may encourage is to put question marks in here, but that's not something that's supported in all browsers. So that's where I'm going to leave it for now because I've run over 30 minutes. I will finish off getting rid of the red and committing this stuff next time.